Welcome to the Novice Woodworker channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how I upgraded my work from home space with a brand new desk. I'm going to make the desk out of white oak. I let it acclimate in my shop for several weeks before starting this project. The first step was to lay out all the boards and determine the best side and sections of each one. Then I took them to the miter saw and cut each board down to rough length. These boards are pretty large and fairly heavy. I didn't think I'd be able to get a good result using the jointer on the edges, so instead I grabbed a track saw and squared up one edge on each board. For this one, I accidentally missed a part in the middle. To give you an idea of how slow I was moving, because this is the first time I was cutting boards this thick, this clip here is still sped up 200%. Now that I had a square edge on each of the boards, I had to square up the other edge. So I went to my table saw and I started by making shallow cuts on each board because I only have the 1.75 horsepower table saw. I wasn't sure I'd be able to make it through the entire thickness of the boards in one pass. So I made a small pass, raised the blade up, made a second pass, raised the blade up a third time, and then I was able to make a through cut on each of the boards. Okay, now we've got some square boards. I decided to use Dominoes on this project, and this is my first time using Dominoes and the Domino machine. So I marked up each board where I wanted all the dominoes to go, and I pulled out the domino cutter. I spaced out the dominoes evenly across the boards, leaving space on the ends for when I cut the final length. Next up, I had to glue the dominoes into all but one of the boards. Putting dominoes in all the holes would make it even harder to put together than it already was. I didn't want to make that mistake this time. With the dominoes in, it was time to put glue on the edges and turn these boards into a panel. My mistake was putting glue on all the boards while I was working in a desert. There's no humidity here, and I probably should have glued up one edge on each board at a time. Then I could have taken my time assembling that board with the glued edge to the previous board. This project did need a little help from the persuader. Okay, a lot of help from the persuader. In the end, I did prevail and got the final board attached and all the dominoes set. Now I could bring out the clamps and start clamping this piece together. Since I'm only beginning this hobby, relatively speaking, my clamp collection is a little low, so enjoy the nice mix of pipe clamps and bar clamps. Easy there, strongman. You don't have to tighten them too tight. I left the panel in the clamps overnight so it could set, and the next day I came back into the shop and took all the clamps off. And then it was time for everybody's second favorite hobby, scraping off dried up glue squeeze out. In my case, I used an old chisel, but I might have to start looking into those glue scrapers that everybody keeps talking about. Now for some fun. I picked up a Jet 2244 drum sander about a month before starting this project, and this is the first time I get to use it. There was a bit of a learning curve for drum sanders and heavy projects, but I figured it out in the end. After I did 80 grit on the drum sander, I grabbed my hand sander and did 100 and 120 grit across both sides of the surface of the desk. With both sides of the desk feeling nice and smooth, it was time to break out the track saw and cut this desk to length. Again, I did it in a couple of passes because it was still pretty thick and I wasn't super confident my saw would make it through in one pass. There were some knot holes and a few cracks along one of the boards, so I grabbed some epoxy that had been sitting around for a little while, so I'm not sure if it was good, and tried to fill them up. And this meant another round of going through the drum sander and the hand sander to get rid of all the excess epoxy that had spilled out. could have stopped there, but I didn't like all the blocky edges, so I put a chamfer bit in my handheld router and went around all the edges for the top and the bottom to add a small chamfer for a little visual difference. Okay, now this really is the fun part. Time to apply finish. On this project, I wanted to use Rubio Monocoat because I'd used it on a few other projects before, on walnut and maple, and I just really liked how the finish looked and how it felt after it was applied. So I grabbed my little plastic scraper, mixed up the Rubio Monocoat Pure 3-to-1, and started moving it around like I knew what I was doing. Something you may notice as I so diligently apply finish to the chamfered edges here is that the Pure Monocoat really keeps sort of an amber, warm, kind of yellowish color to it. I've seen a few different YouTubers and woodworkers using different colors, like cotton or white on white oak, which really brings out that white color and lightens up the look of the piece. I think I might try that in one of my future projects, just to have a nice comparison of what pure and lighter colors might look like next to each other. I wiped off the excess finish and waited a few minutes before buffing the desk with a cloth, as per Rubio instructions. After letting the finish set for a couple of days, I attached it to some GeekDesk hardware for some of that fancy sit-stand desk action. Putting together the GeekDesk kit was easy and the instructions were very clear. Assembling the legs only took a few minutes. Smooth. Overall, this was a simple project, but I got to practice a couple new techniques and use a couple new tools. I was also able to clean up that mess I called an office. And hey, hit that subscribe button and maybe the notification bell icon before you go.